Well, since the Premier League is back in full swing, I'm chatting with James Olley yet again, focusing on the London clubs, two specific clubs, James, Chelsea and Arsenal. Oh my goodness, London is definitely torn between these two clubs. We'll, leave Spurs for another day, but just Arsenal, Arsenal, Arsenal. Of course, the talk of this week, we've seen it, a week that they definitely would want to forget. Even just last week, I suppose, when we were previewing, their first game against City, you said it has been a hot mess. Even behind the scenes, we've seen it's still a bit of a hot mess on the pitch as well. And then you look at Chelsea and you really are starting to just buy into what Frank Lampard is doing with such a young team that people really didn't give them, a chance at the beginning of last season. So just compare the two clubs and the directions of what they're going. And is there anything that Arsenal can probably learn from what Chelsea's doing?
Well, spending money helps, I think, is probably what they could learn. It's difficult to look at Arsenal from a purely football perspective. This is a squad that needs a radical overhaul, and there isn't at the moment a sense of purpose or direction about how they're going to go and do that. Whereas at Chelsea, they are spending big money always appeases fans, but they're going out early and they're getting their targets. The fact that they've already signed two players, on considerable money, you can't say the same about Arsenal at the moment. They are more concerned about whether they retain the players they have, whether that's taking up the option on David Luiz, or whether that's extending contracts of key players like Aubameyang or Saka, who got another assist yesterday against Brighton. One of the few positives of this whole season has been Bukayo Saka, and if they lose him, it's another blow to, and it sends really the wrong message about where the club's going. That not only do you lose potentially your big senior experienced player in Aubameyang, but if the next generation doesn't want to be there as well in someone like Saka, then it sends out real alarm bells in terms of, prospective signings, and anybody who's coming into Arsenal, they're going to think, what are they getting themselves into? And I wonder whether Mikel Arteta might be thinking that now as well.
I was just going to start with Mikel Arteta there because, like I said, you keep your ear close to the ground, especially when it does come for Arsenal. And I mean, the romance of Frank Lampard, being a club legend at Chelsea is still there as well with Mikel Arteta, at Arsenal. What is the direction you feel that he wants to take with this Arsenal team? How long can it take, and will he actually get everything he needs to make this Mikel Arteta's team?
Well, I mean, that is the big question, because I think you're seeing, particularly with Frank Lampard and Petr Cech obviously had a fantastic relationship as players. Petr Cech is now technical director at Chelsea. Their relationship is strong. Now, of course, they're going to have disagreements. Willian is a good example of that. I think if Lampard, was just had autonomy there, I think he would just give Willian the contract that he wants and keep him. So it's not as if to say that, Frank's getting everything that he's asking for. But if you look at what's happening at Arsenal, I mean, Luiz is a really good example of this, David Luiz. David Luiz says publicly, I want to stay. Mikel Arteta says publicly, I want him to stay. So why hasn't he stayed? Why hasn't he signed this contract? And the reason is that there are people at a senior level, particularly the ones with their hands on the purse strings, thinking we don't really want to give 120 grand a week to a 33-year-old centre-back whose performances, let's be honest, have been inconsistent. And it does feel as though there are competing voices at Arsenal that are pulling the plan in different directions. And understandably so to some extent, because they are a club that is not underpinned by the same financial resource as Chelsea. They do, it is more important for them to spend every penny of their money wisely. But it does come back to the ownership in some regards, because ultimately Stan Kroenke's not a poor man. If he wanted to invest heavily in this squad, he could do. Obviously, financial fair play limits that to some extent, but he could be putting his hand in his pocket. He isn't. Roman Abramovich is. And it really says a lot about where the two clubs are. Spending the money the way they have, Chelsea now look like a Champions League team at the very least, and maybe even a team that could go and challenge for the Premier League title next year with one or two more additions, probably defensively. Arsenal now look like a team that could finish in the top half if they're lucky. And that's really the contrasting trajectories of these two teams. One looks as though they have a clear strategy that is on the up. The other is squabbling internally to work out what their budget is and what the future is going to look like, and just how they can plot a journey back to the Champions League, let alone becoming a team that can challenge for the league again.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week. Subscribe to ESPN Plus.